mid 90s, David Wood was serving a 10-year prison term for bashing his father's head in with a hammer. And in that time, he met an inmate named Randy, who caused him to convert to Christianity by giving him a book called Fox's Book of Martyrs. And that book caused David to become a Christian.
Because there's an important topic that was very crucial in my becoming a Christian, and yet certain elements have been called into question.
Now, this book led David to believe that all 12 of the apostles died because they claimed, were martyred because they claimed that they saw Christ rise from the dead.
So the disciples, the apostles, had to believe what they were dying for, but this means that they were convinced that they had seen Jesus risen from the dead. Now, usually when someone is willing to lay down their life for something, it's for an ideology that they got from someone else, and that ideology could be true or false. The disciples were dying for something that they saw. What could have convinced so many different people that they had all seen a resurrected man? I could explain one witness by saying he's crazy, but all of them?
Now, despite this being David's initial reason for his conversion, he later realized that there are issues with this book and that the information within cannot be trusted. And in one of my videos, I actually did press him on this topic.
All right, so Fareed, our good Muslim friend, wants to know why I haven't made a video about the deaths of the apostles. I talked about it in a lot of videos, but specifically on that topic. And I thought, well, there's someone who's much more knowledgeable about this than I am. So here I am with Dr. Sean McDowell, who literally wrote the book on the fate of the apostles.
Yeah, so the apostles were martyred, therefore they believed in the resurrection, therefore Jesus rose from the dead. That's like the gist of the argument that Christians base their faith on. Now, Sean's work in this specific topic did damage this argument, and credit should be given to him for being fair with the historical accounts, well, at least more fair than most Christians. And of course, a lot of Christians are not happy with his findings.
Almost every week, somebody tags me on Twitter where somebody says, here's how the apostles died. And they'll get like hundreds of thousands of views. And I have to kindly say, you know what, we really don't know this. And then all these Christians lose their mind and attack me. I'm like, I wrote the book on this. Let's get our facts right. We're losing credibility, but don't be afraid to get our facts right. I still think we can trust their testimony. And they're like, Sean said none of these are true. And I said, I'm not trying to rain on anybody's party and destroy traditions. I just want to know historically, what can we actually conclude about the stories of their deaths?
The question on my mind is, of all the topics you could get into, why did you want to focus on destroying everyone's confidence in Fox's Book of Martyrs when we were all perfectly happy with it?
You asked me excellent question.
Now, I don't want to dwell too much in regards to the criticisms against Fox's Book of Martyrs. However, it's a book that was written about 450 years ago, and it conflicts with a lot of the information that you find in earlier sources from the 2nd and 3rd century. And in fact, there's some details within this book that can only be seen as fabrication.
And this would actually be red flags if you're reading Fox's Book of Martyrs, because Fox's Book of Martyrs is listing dates, saying Philip died in 54 and this and that.
I don't know how they came up with that.
Now, Sean categorizes the martyrdoms of the apostles from highest probability to the lowest, which is very unlikely. And he concludes that there are only 2 from among the disciples that were at the highest level. And after David listens to Sean's presentation and he takes the information in, he's convinced by what Sean has to say, and he beseeches other Christians to drop these bad arguments.
All right. Well, thank you, Sean McDowell, for clearing that up for everyone. And guys, let's all try to base our arguments on the evidence we have available to us. And, you know, if you read that argument in the past, like I have, and you've been using it, that's fine. You went with what you had, but we have more accurate information to go on. So let's make sure we're all using the best information in our apologetics.
Now, there are a couple of criticisms that I'd like to make towards Sean's video and some of his work. Despite him bringing the number down from 12 to 2, I feel that there's some issues with some of his conclusions, because even those that he is quite fairly certain that they were martyred, like Peter, the information that he has provided is lacking. So the first issue is Sean will quote sources that are not explicit at all about Peter being martyred, and then he will quote sources that mention a martyrdom but will have nothing to do with the resurrection.
Of the 12, I think only 2 are in the highest level of historical probability or close to it. So if we break this down, Peter, for example, there's 2 first-century sources, John 21 and 1 Clement 5. And Bart Ehrman writes that at least these are sources that the writer is aware of a tradition of the execution of Peter. 2 first-century sources.
So let's take a look at these individually. By the way, I'm granting for the sake of the discussion that the Gospel of John is authentically attributed to John. But when we look at the quote, we find nothing explicit about Peter being killed. What we find isn't even a report about Peter's death, but a prophecy by Jesus, which, again, isn't explicit at all. As for the quote from Clement, if we do accept these words as indicative of a martyrdom, we find that this didn't occur because of him believing in the resurrection, but rather because of jealousy. According to another source provided by Sean, which is the Acts of Peter, the jealousy may have been tied to Agrippa and Albinus, since their wives and concubines didn't want to have intercourse with them after their conversion to Christianity. Now, regardless as to what is meant here, we're jumping from jealousy being the cause for Peter's martyrdom all the way to Peter was martyred because of the resurrection and his belief in it and his call towards the deity of Christ. That's quite a leap, guys. And after all, the Romans would kill you for much less than claiming that Christ is a deity, as Sean admits.
Now, I think we make 2 mistakes. I think there's some Christians, in fact, yesterday I was talking to one who was like, from the moment that Christians became believers, there was this nonstop kind of, empire-wide persecution against Christians. I'm like, that is overstated. But there's also been some people like Candida Moss, who would argue has gone the other direction and undermined the evidence we have that at least it cost something for Christians, whether we call it persecution or not, to proclaim the living Jesus. And by the way, the issue was not that they said Jesus was God. It's that the Christians would not also sacrifice to the local deities, which was viewed as harming the empire.
By the way, there's so much that I could have said about the topic, and this could have been a really lengthy video going through all the sources and every single claim that Sean makes, but I'm not interested in that. I just wanted to make this direct, basic challenge. And by the way, I'm sincerely appreciative of what Sean has done, especially when you compare it to David's initial cause for conversion. Anyhow, the challenge: prove that the disciples were martyred because of their claims about the resurrection. Not because of jealousy, not because of any other random reason. And you see, I can clearly tell that there's a lacking of evidence because Sean says this in the video.
There is no early Christianity apart from the claim that Jesus is God, and he's demonstrated by raising from the grave. So they're willing to suffer and die because they believe Jesus had risen from the grave and appeared to them.
And of course, this is blatantly false because there were Christians early on that did not believe in the resurrection, did not even believe in the crucifixion. Now, if you're a Christian and you'd like me to share my thoughts on that specific matter and you'd like me to produce a video about it, then please mention your request in the comments below. But yeah, in any case, this can't even be proven with Peter, who is at the top of the list according to Sean. And by the way, as you guys know, I'm a Muslim. I do accept that Jesus is the Messiah. And I believe that because Muhammad, peace be upon him, told us this. And it's something that you actually find explicitly, again, that's the key word, explicitly in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 14:61. And Muhammad, peace be upon him, also taught us that Christians have gone astray by turning Christ into a deity, something that he also never claimed. For the God of Abraham and Moses is one and not three in one. But yeah, Christians, please give Sean a break. He's doing the best that he can with the sources that he has. And for those of you that are still living in the 16th century, believing a book of legends, then if David Wood can learn from his mistakes, then so can you. And to the rest of you guys, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How do I know I'm not being crazy right now? How do I know I'm not being crazy right now?